All right, Potomac River Toyota Series, September 21st through the 23rd. Let's get into it. Major League Fishing coming back to the Potomac River for the Toyota Series. For those of you who don't know, the Toyota Series is comprised of 6 divisions. Okay, 6 divisions: Central, Northern, Plains, I think Southern or South, Southern, Southwest, and West. Each division has 3 events each. So Northern Division is where we're talking coming up later this week on the Tidal Potomac. And it's really great to actually have this event in a different time period than we normally do, okay? If you go look at the historical time frame for events, other than like sometimes supers in like the BFLs, which is the Bass Fishing League. Let's talk about MLF really quick. For those of you, really quickly, bear with me. For those of you who are unfamiliar, there there are a lot of people that are new, a lot of people that are coming up, a lot of high school, a lot of different people that I meet that come to subscribe and follow me on Facebook. So you've got the Bass Pro Tour at the top, obviously. Then you have the Tackle Warehouse Invitationals. Then you have the Toyota Series. And then obviously you've got the Phoenix Bass Fishing League. The BFL and the Toyota Series have a co-component. You have a Strike King co-angler side. And then your Tackle Warehouse Invitationals and your, obviously, Bass Pro Tour do not for MLF. So just think of it like that. So you got about 150, I think sign-up is still open. I think it's till tomorrow, but about 150 boats going out of, and I've got it marked right here, Smallwood State Park in Marbury, Maryland. And it's pretty much where the bigs go out, okay? It's right on Mattawamma Creek, and it's predominantly the whole creek is pretty much a community hole nowadays. But because of just the amount of tournaments that have come to Potomac and the amount of tournaments that have anglers that have fished in Mattawamma, and when you talk Potomac River, people just know, doesn't matter where they've ever been here, doesn't matter where they've ever fished here, they know from pro-level events, Mattawamma, okay? Fish in the grass, right? I think this year could be different. And we're going to get into a little bit why I think this year is going to be different if you've been out on the river in the last 3 weeks, okay? Remember, most of the events from MLF, majors, what I mean by majors is even bass, elites, okay? Don't fish in September. Don't fish it in September, okay? You can go all the way back, okay, to FLW days, okay? It's more times than not, it's June. It's heated middle of summer, or maybe like post spawn or early summer. It's not late September, okay? That's been a recent development, okay, for the last few years, where they've kind of you see that in the schedule next year as well. They're changing things up again. Remember, they're going to Texas early in the year at the majors, right, for both bass and BPT, okay, instead of Florida. Right, they're going to the same places, okay. At least bass is. They're just kind of changing it up with the times that they're going there. So did that, so whatever that's worth. But we just had an event on the river, okay, on the 16th was Bass Fishing League Shenandoah Division, okay, 2-day event, super, all right. And I'm not even really sure that's going to help you because of what's happening in the river, okay? And it's just a really interesting dynamic that's happening right now. This is like hurricane season, right? But we've been lucky the last few years. But these storms are still happening. They're just not hitting landfall, okay? Bunch of storms that were on out in the ocean, but didn't make the news because they didn't make landfall and do any kind of destruction. But again, this is a tidal fishery, okay? And so what's been happening, you've got kind of like there's a trifecta happening right now at Potomac River, which I'm really excited about this event. From a fan perspective and an angler perspective, it would be freaking absolutely brutal, okay? And I think it's going to be that way. I think it's going to be a tougher Potomac event than we've seen in recent years because of this trifecta. So what do we look about this trifecta? One, we're seeing the transition, okay, of I would say early pre-transition, okay? because we had a mild summer, hot summer in August. But I mean, like, we didn't have any major weather events. It's been pretty consistent. It's been hot. Okay, now tidal always gets a change, right? Okay, so there's always that ebb and flow in a tidal fishery. We all know this, okay? If you've ever sat on a dock, if you've ever gone on vacation at the river, you know what I'm talking about. The river changes throughout the day, okay? As opposed to maybe your inland river systems, right? Because of the tidal influences, right? This is a fishery that is ginormous, okay? And how that tide influences different times of the day, okay, is why you get what's called running the tide. Okay, you'll hear an angler say, we're going to run the tide. What does that mean? That means they're not staying fixed in one spot. Okay, basic, that's what that means. It means he's going to run the tide. He's going to start lower. He's going to start lower for the most part, in the lower part of the Potomac, um, and work his or her way up. Okay, because the tide works its way that way in terms of the time frame of when high tide is, right? And so that you'll have guys that will run and gun and run the tide, meaning they'll start low and then they'll start in the creeks in the grass in the south and then go upriver towards DC and keep hitting, trying to stay ahead or right on, give or take, the tides, okay, as the tide moves up. Okay. So here's the problem. The tide influence for the past week has been coupled by the fact that we've had storms out on the ocean, big storms. Okay, so the tide has been greater, okay, in water density, but it's also been, for lack of a better word, saltier, okay, because it's bringing in a lot more of the salt water into a freshwater fishery. You hear terms like brackish water, all of that kind of stuff, right? Well, in the tidal fishery, it just continues to push it up. And as it pushes up, that salt density or salinity, okay, thins out as you get higher in the fishery. All right. So as you work your way up from down below, okay, through here, Nanjamboy, Port Tobacco, Nanjamboy, you come around as the tide works up through the Virginia Creeks, okay, all along the side throughout the different stages of the day. And we're going to talk about the tide times here really quickly because that's going to influence the event as well. So I wrote down the tide times for this event coming up, and you basically can pick your gauges of what tide you want to look at, right? I like to use Marshall Hall. I mean, that's where I launched from the Potomac. I saw some pros launching from there. I saw some pros launching from Leesylvania, pros out on the water, pre-fishing in different areas, in different places. And I always love it because I always love to see where these guys, just because someone's pre-fishing there doesn't mean that's where they are. They could be looking for new water. They already have. A lot of these guys have been here 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Okay. But there are a lot of new guys. Okay, in the top right now, we've got for the AOI race for this series, this division of the Toyota Series, you got some New Yorkers, Canadians, okay, you got some Texans, some Floridians, and then you also are going to throw in the mix the local hammers. Martin Villa is going to be the one guy who constantly finishes up in the top on the Potomac River I think he's from Charlottesville, Virginia. But you got some other Virginia guys who know this Potomac fishery very, very well. The funny thing about the Potomac River is people will tell you that, there's no secrets about the Potomac River because the tours have come here so much that, the secrets of 20 years ago are all kind of out there. The internet, schmucks like me on YouTube, we talking about the river, but there are still some spots. And it's going to be interesting. And I love these kinds of events. It's what gets me pumped up is because sometimes things aren't always what they seem, right? Like when you're watching NFL football, they don't ever really diagnose the play really for you. right? Like that all the motion, right? I mean, the John Madden days are kind of over. We just don't have anybody else left with that kind of like, passion to like do the X's and O's and all that. And this guy goes here and this guy goes here and this guy. That's fishing, mates. Like it is. Because a lot of it's misdirection. Because I have seen professional anglers fish, pre-fish, and not even touch that spot during the event. Okay. And because everyone's eyeballs are on you. You got guys out on the bay. You got guys out on the main channel. You got guys out, obviously in Mattawoman. You got guys at the park for the last week or two. Everybody knows when these guys are coming, right? And you got locals that are following boats. You got and it's all. I don't think any of it's nefarious, but you've got like guys that are, that want to know where the anglers go, and they will troll them in the fishery. Like I'm sure that goes on in all parts of the country, but the Potomac in our region is the one where I see that the most. And so sometimes it is about smoke and mirrors. It is about like they have their spots and they'll go back to them, and and they don't really like, and they go out when they get in here for pre-fishing. They go out looking for new water and kind of feel like something. We've seen this a lot. Look, we've had a lot of our creeks like Nanjaboy and different places like that were fire a decade ago, and then grass, okay, non-existent, disappeared. Okay, it's an environmental effect. It's a human effect. It's a lot of things that contribute to that. Some of it's translocation of bass. Okay, it is. Okay, when we're taking fish out of all these creeks and taking them over to the Maryland side and Smallwood, and then depending on whether or not if they have the boat, the release boat or not, if they don't, they just go right down the tube and they get dumped in the Mattawoman or right there at Smallwood. And that's why Mattawoman for the last 20 years is just its population, all the big fish, right? All local tournaments, and not MLF. MLF did, for Tackle Warehouse Invitational, did bring a boat to go back and release them in different areas. But all the local tournaments there, all those tournaments that have weigh-ins at Mattawoman, they're releasing their fish right there, okay, at the park. And so those fish pretty much stay, and you've got that sustaining population. And so that's why it's a popular place to fish. Because it also has the elements, okay, of grass and in that regard. So let's talk about the tides, okay? This week doesn't set up good. Like, I've had a lot of people telling me about that. Like, what do we like? It's just one of those things where we'll schedule the tide, the lunar cycle, the tide, what's going to happen. So Thursday morning, you've got high tide just after midnight, and then you've got low tide at 6:48. Well, they're launching at 7 a.m. Okay, mid-river, low tide. They're launching at low tide right around 7 o'clock, and then high tide is at 1 o'clock. But I think weigh-in is at 2. It might be 3. Let me double check. It's 3. Weigh-in is at 3. So you got that high tide coming out in the late afternoon. Okay, so coming in, and then okay, so that's Thursday. Okay, now the weather, we're gonna get rain. I've been looking at the weather, and of course it's the Potomac, so it can change on a dime. So like today's weather, I think tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, I think Thursday's going to be just like today, you know what I mean? And then the weekend's going to get kind of shady. Okay. We're still going to be in the 70s. I don't think we're going to hit the 80s at all. You're probably going to get a lot of wind late in the week and probably rain. You almost always get rain on the weekends on the Potomac River late summer. Almost always. It could just be a thunderstorm. It could just be an hour event. Those happen all the time on the Upper Bay and in the Potomac. Okay. So so when you see that, so I get messages about people, and people are like, like, oh, it's at 12:30 or 12, or it's at, different times for tides. It's because of what are you talking about? Are you talking about a gauge that's down here, or are you talking about a gauge that's up here? Okay. Middle River tide is not the same as Lower River. Aquia Creek, Potomac Creek tide is not the same as DC's tide, right? Because the tide works its way up. So when you see, like, you think like the whole estuary is tide is 1 o'clock, right? It's not. Between an hour difference all the way up as you make your way up. And so you just got to pay attention to that. A lot of people get that confused about that. Okay, how that tide is. They just think if you launch from Louisiana, the tide chart, and you're going set, it's not the same. Okay, there's nuances to it. Is all I'm saying. Just understand that. Check the nearest gauge of where you are planning to fish and launching from. And like I said, I've seen guys from both the Virginia and the Maryland side in the last week or so. Interesting, not seen as many and not talked to and a lot of guys, and take this for whatever it's worth, about DC anymore. Okay. People have won events, okay, on the Potomac, upriver. All right. And I'll get to that in a second. So then Friday, you've got like a little bit after 1 a.m., 7:50, so an hour later for high tide, and then high tide, low tide, 7:50 for low tide. Then low tide another hour later, so almost 9 a.m. on Saturday. So see how that pushes an hour each day as you move forward into the 3 days. Coupled with the weather, and then coupled with that tide situation we had going on with what's happening out in the ocean, it's a changing dynamic, and it's going to influence this event. And a lot of people underestimate that, but that salinity factor is a big factor. Okay. You've also got the grass factor. Okay. And so when you think about that, even though you were at the river last year and you come back this year, the river's different. For example, in the DC area, it's hardly any grass. Okay. Whatever's happening in the river system. Okay. There's less and less and less grass. Okay. And so that plays a part, of the dynamics we're going to talk about in terms of patterns, right? People used to be able to run upriver, get a limit, and then come back down and fish the grass to up their limit, right? Because there was shallower water grass, channel, some deeper water with some shallow grass, pilings. We're talking spoils and smoots, okay, where people could throw the Carolina rig. I'm talking old school presentations, right? Maybe not for the young bucks, but like throw the Carolina rig, throw the chop shot rig, and get 5 bass limit pretty quick, okay? And just get 5 in the live well, right? That's kind of old school mentality, but that's what we used to do, okay? Back in the FLW days, back in the tournament days, all that stuff would be like you could do that, okay? And then, depending on what your strengths were, know the areas up there, Fox Ferry, okay, during low tide, DC and low tide, okay, pretty good spot, pretty good areas during low tide, okay, DC as opposed to low tide south of the bend or in the creeks, okay. You get some of these creeks in the Virginia side in low tide is low tide, okay, and it can be freaking just a wasteland during low tide, right? So knowing some of the areas to fish at low tide, is a skill set that it takes a long time. I think of people, fishing the river a lot and consistently to figure those nuances out. There's a couple of places that you don't hear about as much. You hear about all the grass and the creeks, Potomac Creek, like most tournaments, okay? It doesn't matter whether it's pro or local, regional. Get one in the milfoil, okay? They get there's a bunch of grass in the Potomac, but it's predominantly milfoil, okay? You've got hydrilla and you've got other eelgrass, more eelgrass now than ever. But for the most part, historically, it's milfoil, okay? And you've got this kind of tug of war that happens. Okay, most people come here with the notion it's a grass fishery, right? But is it really for big fish? Because if you look at catch rates and if you talk to people, a lot of the people that I talk to, their bigger fish isn't necessarily coming out of the grass. It's coming off of hard cover, especially this time of year. Okay. Because remember, you got some transitioning to fall, kind of in the preseason. Okay. And a lot of these places don't have a lot of hard cover. Okay. And I mean, docks and DC's got plenty of it. Their events have been won. Okay. Let's think about this. Justin Lucas won off the hardcover in DC in 2016. Okay. Clark Wendock won, again, these are FLW events, off a dock pattern. Okay. Duck blinds, dock patterns. Okay. The events are not always won, regardless of what gets reported in the grass. Although you hear more about more fish being caught in the tournament in places like Mattawoman. And so it's really, really interesting that, you're seeing in the DC side a lot less grass than you have in years past. And that's why I believe less and less of these anglers are making that run to DC. That doesn't mean that a Mike Iaconelli or somebody like that in this event isn't going to make that run, who knows those bridge pilings. I am always my favorite areas on the Potomac outside of going to fish grass is the Virginia side. When I feel like they are relating to hard cover because of the number of railroad bridges going across the creeks, the number of pilings, the number of riprap, the rock banks, all of that stuff. This fishery is not just a grass fishery. Okay. And I know it gets portrayed by a lot of people like that. It just doesn't seem that way to most people that you talk to here. The pros, they can just be grass guys. It's a self-perpetuating, thing. It's like if you're a shallow water guy, and there's been a lot more shallow water flipping and grass and pump and all that stuff, that there may be more grass guys. Well, now there's a lot of live scope guys. There's a lot of live scope guys. Okay, so you don't think there's offshore bass in the Potomac? Okay, I'm telling you right now, when guys are catching 5 and 6 pound largemouth bass on glide baits and swim baits in the upper Potomac, in the lower Potomac, in the tidal. I wish we had those bass in the upper Potomac. They're catching 5-pounders in the tidal Potomac. It isn't in the grass with a swim bait or a glide bait. Okay, it's not. So whenever you see that, they're fishing something else. Okay. And you got to remember that. Okay. And in this event, one of those changes everything. Okay. And so that's what I'm interested in seeing, is who's going to dial that up and go for the bit. Because I think if you're catching 8, at least by Friday, if you're catching 8 to 10 bass, you're probably going to be in contention for the cut a day. Okay. Because let's just think about this for a second. All right. You got 29 pounds. Okay. 29 pounds won the Shenandoah Division 2-day Super Tournament on the 16th of September. Okay. This event will be a week later. Well, less than a week. Okay. So the BFL just happened. All right. 29.1 pounds. Okay. Zach Stupa. All right. That's 15 pounds a day. I don't think we're getting 15 pounds a day based on the trifecta. Okay. So the tide event, the salinity, and the grass. Now, there are areas where the grass is good to go, And there are also areas where the grass is starting to brown out. That's going to be an interesting development for those mates who are going to try to go down to Mallows Bay, Chickamuxon, and Mattawoman, depending on what stretches. Okay? If you're on the Virginia side, it's typically about clumps of grass. Okay? And as that water comes down, right? So the key for those folks, the key on the Virginia side is to get into those creeks as best you can when it is lower tide, so you can see the clumps of grass where they are. Now, on the backs of the creeks, you've got the pads. It's another pattern that we'll talk about. So there's like basically 4 different things that are kind of tug and war in terms of patterns. All right, but you get back in there, the clumps, and so those bass will get in those clumps of grass, right? And if you're throwing a chatterbait on by there, right, there's, maybe a 2 in 10 chance, that you're going to get a bite because they're in the thick of that stuff, right? So you got to get in there. Can't really, and there's nothing, you see that more at a lower tide situation than a high tide. Then there's a lot more water above that, right? Again, being able to know where those clumps are. And so there will be some guys probably that have less experience on the Potomac River maybe than a lot of the other guys that are going to sit and wait out Potomac Creek, a quiet creek, wait it out. They'll wait out the tide, they'll wait out the change, and they'll just wait. Because in those 2 creeks, probably more than anywhere else, the fish are moving. Right? And so it'll be interesting to see that, the boats that stay this week, especially the first 2 days, because you're going to have 150 plus boats before they cut it down. But on the 16th, you had 2 days, 15 pounds a day. I think if you get 15 pounds a day for 3 days, you're going to win this tournament. And that's the big crux when people talk to me. They're like, dude, like how is it like you go out there and you can catch 12 pounds, 13 pounds? It's like, because I don't have to repeat it. Okay, that's why they are professionals and I am not, right? Not that I can't go out there and catch fish. I can't go out there and catch 12 to 15 pounds Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's what makes them pros, okay? I can go out there tomorrow and scrape up 10 or 12 pounds, but I couldn't go back out there on Wednesday and repeat it, okay? That's why I'm not a pro, right? Like, we all can fish. We've all got skills. We've all got confidence baits. We've all got confidence places we can go and put 10, 12 pounds in a boat. That doesn't mean you can do it for 3 days straight. I certainly can. And I know the river really well, okay? And I know the areas that have always performed for me for 20 plus years, okay? And I know the areas that have grass that don't have grass. I know the areas where the American shad and the hickory shad run. I know where they school up before they run, because that's years of being on the water with generational help from grandfathers to fathers to sons to uncles to brothers, right? Like, those are the things that like you get, okay? So where you know where the bait fish, you know where they're going to be schooling up, you know where they're going to be, and more importantly, you know where they're going. But again, the next day it's completely different. So putting a string together of 3 12-pound bags is not really something. If it was, I'd be throwing my hat in that ring a long time ago. Like, to try, because it's just very, very hard to do. Okay, not hard to go out there and pound 10 to 12 pounds. Okay, and a lot of times people see that day one. They see that these things come in anywhere from 10 to 15 pounds, and local guys are like, man, I can go out. I did my local tournament and got 14 pounds on the Potomac River, 14 pounds on the James River, right? I talk to guys like that all the time. It's like, but they couldn't do that 2-3 days in a row. I know I can't at this point. And so that's where that is like just interesting kind of dynamic. So tune back in for part 2 of this, and we're going to talk about the patterns for this week's tournament coming up, Toyota Series on the Tidal Potomac.